Hi there, this is my Volkswagen Dunebuggy that I built about 4 years ago. It's a Volkswagen air-cooled motor, 1600cc. It's a counterweighted cast crank in there. Angle 100 RV profile cam with MP high rev springs. T3 turbocharger off of an 86 Dodge Daytona. I'm pulling that through a 3236 Weber progressive carburetor. And I was using a carburetor, and now I'm using just as a throttle body. And you can see before I was using a thermostatic air cleaner to bring heat off the exhaust. And the drivability greatly improved, especially in the cold mornings where the fuel wouldn't freeze up on you. As you can see here, I got a reservoir bottle filled with coolant because the turbo is a coolant cooled turbo. And it's only needed when you shut down the turbo, and then the heat really saturates and it gets really hot out. So I clocked the turbo cartridge at about 20 degrees to allow for heat scavenging. But then I was kind of really interested in putting fuel injection on this thing, and it would be a great project to do over the year. And so I bought a microsquirt fuel controller online. And then I bought some injectors for like 20 bucks. I bought like 24 of them off a 99 Jeep Cherokee on Craigslist. I made my own fuel rails out of 1 inch by 1 3/4 aluminum stock. I drilled the holes to fit the injectors, and I made a jig up to mount the bungs into the dual port intake manifolds. And I welded it up with an aluminum welder. I should have used TIG, but this actually worked not too bad. And I used a jig so it would weld in there flush and be even straight across from each other, so there'll be no leaks. And it actually turned out really well. And this is my throttle position sensor module that I made up. As you can see, I got a piece of TIG welding rod here hooked up to my carburetor linkage. And this here is my O2 sensor for feedback to the microsquirt. Over in here I got a temperature sensor to measure the intake air. It's an AE with a 1/8 style pipe plug temp sensor. So it fit just perfectly into the dual port intake manifold. So any air that's compressed is heated air, so the microsquirt will recalculate the fuel required for the engine. Over here I got a fuel regulator off of about a 91 Nissan 300 ZX, so regulate my fuel pressure about 45 pounds. And that comes at the end of the line after all the fuel goes through the fuel rails, and then it returns at low pressure back to the tank. Over here I got a coolant temperature sensor mounted above number 4 cylinder, just on top of the exhaust port here. So actually it works pretty good here. It tells you when I'm up to temp, and so as it goes to cold enrichment, it runs leaner as it warms up. Here I installed a 2-bar GM map sensor to measure manifold absolute pressure to tell microsquirt what load the engine is on. I installed the microsquirt module inside the Dunebuggy itself, and I got the relay switch to turn everything on, turn the microsquirt on, and I got my fuses for my O2 sensor. I got the fuses for the fuel injector banks, and the fuse for the microsquirt itself. Right now I'm using the microsquirt in fuel only mode. I'm getting the tach inputs from the negative side of the ignition coil. And microsquirt actually said, the manual said running off the positive terminal into microsquirt and back to the negative side of the coil. Except I kept on blowing the internal resistor off of the microscope control board. Actually, I blew it twice. So I kind of read it in some editorials. I thought I'd run it off the ground side negative terminal into the microscope through a 1k ohm half watt resistor, and that seemed to lower the voltage down into the microscope control board, so you could handle it appropriately, right, instead of blowing the resistor. And then it grounded right to the chassis, and it synced right away. Of course, burning the resistor out of the microscope board wasn't the end of the world. I was able to pick one up for like 20 cents, and I soldered another one on there. I bought it through DigiKey, and I was back in business, and it was up and running again. Over here, I got a Ford 36 missing tooth tone wheel off of eBay for about 12 bucks. And I welded that onto a stock VW crank pulley. Eventually I'll be going with a Hall effect crank position sensor. And then I could run Ford wasted spark coil on it. And that would greatly improve my ignition. Here, I'm going to start this thing right up for you guys here. And you hear the fuel pump turn on.
Cypress Mountain offers family discounts on the GA Pass, Silver Pass, or Cross Country Season Pass. But hurry, the Cypress Mountain Early Bird Season Pass sale ends.
As you can see, it's going to be a while for my O2 sensor to warm up here. You'll see my air fuel ratio gauge there. I got off of Summit Racing.
Cypress Mountain, you'll love it up here.
So it takes a little while for the O2 sensor to warm up. Right now the cold enrichment is on.
Any small McCafe specialty coffee this fall for just $2 plus tax. Enjoy McCafe Caramel Pumpkin Spice Latte, a classic cappuccino, or a McCafe Mocha, all for just $2 plus tax. Each made with freshly ground espresso. But hurry, you can only get a small McCafe specialty coffee for $2 plus tax.
You'll see the air fuel ratio get right into the rich zone. I don't have a high idle air valve on this, so it's just running no choke, just full cold enrichment right now. And there you have it. It's kind of warmed up to temp now, and it's